NIBRS review to a case report in the thick client. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at that same exact process through the eyes of the browser. So we're going to work through the same exact steps on the same exact case report and look at this case report and see how a user who's logged in to WebArms can add in the same NIBRS review. And here we are. So on our case report, we're going to go to our NIBRS tab and we're going to click Start New Review. Now, if we had already had a NIBRS review filled out, we would see that listed here as a linked entry. But since we don't, we know we can click on Start and start a brand new one. Now notice when I click Start, it's going to open up this NIBRS review in a separate tab. The same reason we open up the NIBRS screen in the thick client into a separate window, we can now use two windows, one to review the case report and one to review the actual NIBRS information as well. So once we're inside of our NIBRS review, we have these same steps listed here. Notice my ones are already here now, out next to everything. I've already imported, just by clicking on that Start Review button, I've already imported all the information from this case report. And the same way we just did on the thick client, what our job is to basically step through each of these 7 steps and make sure that we have put in all the information, or that the officer has put in all the information that we want to see here. So from our administrative tab here, we can still do the same thing. We can put in an exceptional clearance if we need to. We could assign cargo theft information. We can see the export status of this case report. Otherwise, we can go on to our next step of our offense segment. Now our offense segment is just going to show us tabs of information. Each one of these cells is one crime code that was attached to this case report. So in my case here, I only have one. Now if I wanted to edit something about this specific crime code, then I can click on that one and it's going to open up and show me all the same information we had access to from the case report screen earlier. So from here we can do the same steps of putting in what the offender was suspected of using, or if there was any domestic abuse attributes. If it's a burglary, I could put in the number of premises that were entered, any gang information, type of criminal activity. All that same information that we saw in the thick client is here as well. Once we've made the changes to this that we want to make, then we can go ahead and hit Save and Close. And that's going to update our crime code and any of the information in it. So each of these, rather than paging through them next and previous, as we would do in the thick client, we can just click on each of them and we can actually see them all at once rather than having to page through them like we did on the thick client side. If we want to, at any point in time, we can validate each segment and it'll let us know if there's any errors, or we could go across the entire thing, validate all, and it'll let us know if we're missing something. So since we haven't completed this NIBRS review yet, it's going to pop up here and give me the error code of 4241. Each of the NIBRS victims entered must be connected to at least one NIBRS offense code, and we'll get to that in a second. So once we're through on the offense segment there, then we can go to our property segment. Here's our piece of stolen property that we put in a second ago. So we can go ahead and click on him as well. See all the same information, the stolen value, the property type description, the value of that property is all entered here. Notice we can't put information anywhere where we can based off the type of property that we're putting in. If we wanted to add more property to this stolen segment, we could add just by clicking there, and we could begin adding more and more information to this case report. Obviously this wouldn't be acceptable for drug equipment, so let's pick up something else here. Let's say clothes. Somebody stole a bicycle and clothes. We could then put in the value of that property as well. If we wanted to remove something, just click the remove button out to the side here, and that'll drop that piece of property out. Once we've made any changes that we want to make, we can go ahead and hit Save and Close, and that will drop us back out to our property main screen here. As we go on to our next tab here, we have our victim. So we can look at our victim, we can see all the information. If we wanted to see more information, then we can come into here and actually click the victim segment. And we can look through and see all that same information that was imported from the case report. Now, just like we talked about in the previous segment, we do need to attach this victim to an offense code. So which offense code that's on this case report is this victim involved with? So we can hit our drop-down menu. It'll show us a list of all of the crime codes on this case report, all one of them. So when I check that box, I've now connected this victim segment of 001 to the UCR offense code of 23H. And at that point, I've met my minimum data circumstances for this page. Now, same things before. We could add in more information if more information is needed. Otherwise, we could come in and hit save and close, and that will drop us back out to the victim screen. Next up, we go to our offender. Our offender's already there waiting for us. We can click on that offender to actually see the information. Now, for the most part, same thing as we looked at on the main side of ARMS as well. If the information was put in correctly by the officer, there's actually not much for us to do here other than correct something if it needed to be corrected. Otherwise, we can just hit save and close. It's going to show us that that was successful. And now, even at this point, we're still only about halfway through the NIBRS review. We could do a validate all, and it's going to once again let us know what we're missing. Each step of the way, we can hit that validate button to see what's left on this NIBRS review. So in my case here, it's letting me know each NIBRS victim of type individual must have a victim-offender relationship to each NIBRS offender. So we can come in here, look at our next tab, which is our victim offender. Now we don't have any information there, so we need to add. So if we come up here to the top, we can select add. We have our victim already selected here. We could select a different one if we had more. We already have our offender selected here. So rather than us having to type that in, all we have to do is just pick their relationship. So the same example that we used from before, we have the same codes available to us here. So what we would do is we would just scroll to the code that we want to use. So in my case here, we'll just say the same thing, the OK code of victims otherwise known. Check that, hit OK. And now when we save and close, we now have a victim-offender relationship put into the system here. Now these are organized by victim, just like they are on the other screen, but just not as clearly. So on this screen, each of these tabs will be a different victim, and then when you click on that victim, you'll associate that victim to every offender that's in there. So if you had 2 or 3 offenders, when I clicked on my victim here, I would have 2 or 3 rows sitting underneath this offender header, and each one would have its own relationship to the victim. Now my last one here is my arrestee. Same thing as before, we have imported as much of the arrest information as we can. So when we get ready to review it, we can just click on that tab, and it's going to open up and show me all the information that the officer entered in for the arrest on this person. All of it's pretty much pre-filled for us. We didn't have to do anything here. We can review it, make sure it's all correct. If we want to change, let's say for example, what the suspect was armed with, or maybe their bias or motivation, we can input that data in here. Otherwise, we can go ahead and hit save and close. And so now we've gone through each of the segments the same way we did on the thick client of ARMS earlier. And now we can go ahead and hit validate all, and we get no errors found throughout our NIBRS review. So we are through with that one, and we could then move on to the next one. Now those are 2 very simple examples of a NIBRS data entry of all the segments. What we're going to look at next in the upcoming videos is going to be some more examples so that you can see some of the different types of cases that you can enter in. So we'll be doing some vandalism, some burglaries, all sorts of fun stuff like that, so that you can get some more particular examples of different types of cases. You can see how they differ and how most of them are generally the same. We're going to be importing the data automatically for you each time, so it's just going to make that process fast. And each of these special situations we're going to look at are just where you need to put in a little bit of extra information based off of what the officer put in or what they didn't put in. Thank you.